Prison was not the end of the road for me, but the beginning of a new phase. My name is Jeremy, and I want to tell you my story. It's a story about how a person can find themselves even in a place where everything seems lost, behind bars. You may think that such stories only happen in movies or books, but believe me, sometimes real life has surprises bigger than any script. I was born and raised in a small town called Riverside, California. It's one of those places where everyone knows each other, where people live simple lives working in the local factories or farms. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked as a cashier at the local supermarket. We weren't rich, but we always had a home, food on the table, and the warmth of a family hearth. My brother was 3 years older than me, and we shared a room where the walls were covered with posters of our favorite athletes and musicians. When I was a kid, I was just an ordinary boy. I ran the streets with my friends, played ball in the yard, and dreamed about what I would become when I grew up. We lived in a modest apartment. Money was always in short supply, but we did not complain. I remember in the winter we had to wrap ourselves in blankets to keep warm because the heating was weak and the bills were unaffordable. My mother always found a way to please us with something delicious, even if it was the simplest, and my father tried to instill in us a sense of responsibility and respect for labor. School was not easy for me, but I tried. True, I was more interested in sports than in studying. Another of my hobbies was that I liked to mess around with motorcycles. I have a good old Honda bike, which was passed down to me from my father. This bike is far from new, and I'm constantly having to fix and tidy it up. But you know what? I love it. Even when my hands are covered in oil and the nuts won't come off, I feel like I'm doing something important. This bike isn't just a means of transportation, it's a part of my life, a link to my past. Every time I get on it and start the engine, I feel something inside me come alive. But soccer became my passion, and I dreamed of becoming a professional player. At school matches, I scored goals and was told that I had a chance to make it to the big sport. These dreams warmed my soul, gave me hope for a better future. However, the reality turned out to be cruel. During one of the meetings with our rivals, I injured my knee. After graduation, I realized that soccer is just a dream and you have to live in reality. It was not easy to find a job, especially without education and experience. There were few opportunities in our city, and most guys either went into the army, like my brother, or left for big cities in search of a better share. But I stayed at home, believing that I could find my place here. Then I decided to go to work on a construction site with my father. The work was hard, but honest. Every morning, I got up early, took tools, and went to the site. Days passed in sweat and dust, but in the evening, when I returned home, I felt useful. The money, of course, was not much, but it allowed me to support my family and keep afloat somehow. But when I turned 22, everything changed. One evening, coming home after a long day at work, I met my old friends. They were standing outside the old garage where we used to gather and smoking cigarettes. When they saw me, they smiled and waved. "Hey, Jeremy, come join us," yelled one of them. I stopped, thinking it would be nice to spend the evening with the guys. After all, it had been so long since we'd seen each other. And the work on the construction site was so exhausting. I wanted a little distraction. They offered me a beer and relax. Who could refuse to spend an evening with friends? I agreed, even though I felt a little uneasy inside. But the desire to relax outweighed it. We sat on old chairs, drank beer, and talked about everything. We talked about work, girls, motorcycles, plans for the future. Then one of the guys, whose name was Mike, looked at me conspiratorially and asked, "Listen, Jeremy, you need money, don't you? I do some business sometimes. Maybe you want to make some money. Easy money. I froze. What did he mean? It took me a while to realize what he was talking about. But then I remembered that a couple times I'd heard guys talking about some work. I didn't pay much attention to it then, thinking it was just chit-chat. But now the situation seemed more serious. Mike continued, "There's a guy who handles deliveries. He needs an assistant. It's a simple job. Pick up the goods, give them to someone else. It's good money. What do you think? The idea sounded good to me. I really needed the money. I needed to pay for bike parts. Construction work was a penny a dozen, and this was easy money. I didn't think about the consequences. I just wanted to solve my financial problems quickly. Of course, in my heart I knew it was illegal, but at the time I thought it was just a one-time deal, not a big deal. Okay, I said, trying to look confident. I'll give it a try. And so began the worst period of my life. That night we went to meet the dealer. It was as smooth as if we'd done it 1,000 times. We met in a dark alley, exchanged a few phrases, and got the goods. When we got back to the car, we were in high spirits. Mike clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good job, buddy." But after a while, our fun was cut short. We were stopped by the police. At first, I didn't realize what was going on. We were relaxed, driving down the road, not touching anyone. But then sirens sounded from everywhere, and police cars surrounded us. When they told us to get out, my heart sank. It turned out that the dealer had been tracked for a long time, and our meeting was the final point in their investigation. I was arrested on the spot, charged with drug distribution. The trial was short and formal. A lawyer tried to defend me, but there was too much evidence. I soon found myself in prison for 10 years. The world had fallen apart. I couldn't believe it had ended like that. 10 years. How would I spend that much time behind bars? The first months in prison were the hardest. I felt broken, lost. Every day seemed endless, and I saw no meaning in my life. I woke up in the morning thinking it was a dream, but reality was unforgiving. The cameras, the bars, the constant checks. It was depressing. I almost stopped socializing with other prisoners, preferring to be alone. But over time, I began to realize that I had to move on to find a way out of this situation. I couldn't let myself drown in despair. I started reading books I found in the prison library. At first, it was just detectives and adventure novels to distract myself. But then I came across philosophical works and psychology literature. These books opened a new world to me, made me think, analyze, ask questions about the meaning of life. I began to study different subjects, became interested in science, history, mechanics. Time, which used to stretch infinitely slowly, began to fly by unnoticed. I felt myself changing from the inside out. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I started looking for ways to improve my life, even while behind bars. These books helped me realize that even in the most difficult situations, you can find light. One day, a guard came up to me and told me that a training program was opening in the prison. He explained that it was an initiative of the administration to rehabilitate prisoners and prepare them for life after release. The program included courses in various trades, ranging from cooking to programming. The first course I chose was programming. Why programming? The thing is that I always like to understand technology. When I was a kid, I used to take apart old radios and try to put them back together again. Computers also attracted my attention, although we didn't have them at home at that time. I thought that programming was something difficult and inaccessible, but why not give it a try? After all, I had nothing to lose. The guard enrolled me in the course, and a week later the lessons started. The first lessons were devoted to the basics: how a computer works, what an operating system is, how a network works. Then we moved on to programming languages. We started with simple HTML and CSS, then moved on to JavaScript. Each new piece of knowledge opened the door to a wonderful world of technology. I learned a lot about computers, programming languages, and creating applications. Gradually, I began to realize that I had a talent for it. I spent my free time at the computer whenever I had the chance, learning new technologies and creating simple programs. My hobby grew into a real passion. Every day I looked forward to classes like a holiday. Teachers saw my interest and started to give me additional assignments. I immersed myself in the study of complex algorithms, learned to work with databases and develop interfaces. At times, I even forgot where I was so absorbed in the work. After a year, I was able to create complex applications and help other inmates solve technical problems. The guards noticed my progress and started entrusting me with small tasks to maintain the prison computers. This gave me access to the internet, which allowed me to deepen my knowledge. I familiarized myself with new technologies, read articles and forums of programmers, watched training videos. I was especially interested in artificial intelligence. I started studying how neural networks are created, how machines can learn and make decisions. It was something incredible. I also became fascinated with motorcycle design programs. Remembering my old Honda, I started modeling virtual versions of motorcycles, experimenting with different components and settings. Time flew by. Each day brought new discoveries and achievements. I felt I had finally found my calling. When my release date approached, I was ready to start a new life. I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I could make a living with my new skill. But as it turns out, the real world is not as simple as it may seem. Right after I got out of prison, I started contacting different companies offering my services. I sent out resumes, went on interviews, talked about my projects and skills. But everywhere I got rejections. No one wanted to hire an ex-convict, even if he had real skills. No experience, some said. Your past makes us uncomfortable, others added. 2 weeks passed in fruitless attempts, and I began to lose hope. But then one day, while looking through job postings, I came across a small IT company in Los Angeles. The name was unfamiliar, but I decided to take a chance and send my resume there. I wrote honestly about my background, mentioning that I had acquired most of my knowledge in prison. A few days later, I received a call inviting me to an interview. At the meeting, I talked about my experience and showed some of the projects I had worked on in prison. The head of the company, a young guy named Mark, listened to me carefully and looked at my work. His eyes lit up with interest. "You know, Jeremy, your projects are impressive," he said. "You can think outside the box and solve complex problems. I'm willing to offer you an internship. If you do well, you might stay with us on a permanent basis." These words sounded like music to me. Finally, someone saw potential in me. I gladly accepted the offer and started working. At first, the work was not difficult, site support, minor code optimization tasks. But I was not discouraged. Every day brought new challenges, and I gladly accepted them. Gradually, my role in the company increased. 6 months later, I was already working full-time. A year later, I was involved in the development of large projects, managing a team of developers and being responsible for important stages of work. My career was developing rapidly. A year later, I was promoted to lead developer and began to run my own projects. Some colleagues became very jealous of me. They thought that I was moving up the career ladder too fast with my background, and this made them unhappy. Some of them deliberately delayed tasks, some of them passed on incorrect information, and some of them simply ignored my instructions. The atmosphere in the team was getting tense, and I felt that I was losing control over the situation. At first, I tried to ignore these little things, thinking that everything would get better with time. But when project deadlines started to slip and the quality of work deteriorated, management took notice. I was called in for a conversation and asked why the team was not coping with the tasks. I was honest about the problems, but I guess it didn't make the right impression. The management reprimanded me for my inability to rally the team and get good results. They said they expected more from a lead developer. The question of my competence came to a head. They gave me one last chance to improve the situation, warning me that if I failed, they would have to consider firing me. It was a low blow. I had put so much effort into this job, and now it could all come crashing down because of someone else's jealousy and unprofessionalism. Something had to change, and fast. I gathered everyone involved in the project and announced that I was going to have a frank conversation. At first, no one wanted to talk, but I insisted. It turned out that one of them was more resentful than the rest. He felt that I was not experienced enough and less trustworthy than they were. I listened to everyone, trying not to interrupt or make excuses. When everyone had spoken, I said, "I understand your dissatisfaction. Indeed, you have more experience in this field, and I respect your professionalism. But let's look at it from the other side. We all work for a common result, and if one of us fails, the whole team suffers. Let's try to join forces and work together, not against each other." A few weeks passed, and a project we were working on was successfully completed. Management recognized our success and praised our team. The question of my competence was no longer raised, but I began to think about starting my own business. This idea had been in my head before, but now it became even more attractive. Working in a company gave me valuable experience and confidence in my abilities. I saw how processes function from the inside, what mistakes managers make, and how to avoid them. In addition, I have accumulated enough knowledge and connections to try to create something of my own. I started thinking about what kind of business to open. It was obvious that I wanted to stay in the IT sphere, but not limit myself to software development. I wanted to create something unique, something that would be different from other companies. I started studying the market, analyzing customer needs, and coming up with concepts. One night, lying in bed, it hit me. Why not create a company specializing in mobile app development for small and medium-sized businesses? Many entrepreneurs need quality apps but don't have the resources to develop them. I could offer them affordable and effective solutions. I devoted the next few months to preparation. At the same time, I continued working in the company, accumulating funds and experience. It was difficult to combine both tasks, but I believed in my idea and was not going to give up. Finally, the day came when I tendered my resignation. The management was surprised. I walked out of the office feeling relieved and excited at the same time. There were new challenges and opportunities ahead of me. Starting my own business proved to be a difficult process. There were moments when I doubted the rightness of my decision. But every time I faced difficulties, I remembered what I had gone through, and it gave me strength. Today, my company is successfully functioning, and I am proud that I was able to realize my dream. I continue to learn and grow. My story is an example of how a person can change his or her life despite the most difficult circumstances. Sometimes I think back to the days when I was behind bars. Prison was not the end of the road for me, but the beginning of a new stage. But now I know that nothing is impossible. The main thing is to believe in yourself and not to give up in the face of difficulties.